I've heard stories of photographers like smuggling themselves on transport planes with like a little hidden camera and stuff. It's a big issue. Now that's kind of like the far end of the scale. What Danielle's talking about is just restrictions on, sort of under the name of the Patriot Act and under the name of national security, there's all kinds of restrictions going on in America, and certainly in New York. There was a movement 2 years ago, I think it was, where they tried to ban all photography of any kind on the New York City subways. Mm-hmm. And that would mean, you guys were just running around taking pictures in front of the screen, tourists in town taking pictures. Hey, let's take a picture of ourselves on the subway. No, it's against the law. I mean, there's so many things where it's just absurd. There was a thing last year, technically to photograph on the streets of New York now, if you're just running around with a camera, you're fine. The minute you have a tripod or lights, you technically need a city permit. Now, the permits are relatively easy to get and they're free, but without a permit,
where do you go to get that?
I can email you the thing. It's the mayor's office of film photography and theater, and you just you do it online. It takes 10 minutes. They fax you back. You're all set. But where I'm going with this is there was a thing last year that they were trying to make it, and I think this was honestly the police department, actually a movement by the police department, where they were trying to fix it so to take any photographs of any kind anywhere in New York, you needed a permit. Now, of course, that's absurd, but they wanted the power to be able to say, hey, you can't take a picture of that, where's your permit? And of course, no one's going to bother getting a permit, and the permit office is never going to be able to keep abreast of all the applications. They can barely do it now. If, for instance, if you send them a permit application with a day's notice, you're lucky if you get it. Typically they want a week, but if you get thousands and thousands of people, or millions of people, anytime any tourist comes to the city, they got to fill out a permit. So the point being, they're just trying to cut down on what you can take pictures of.
And this has had huge implications for the art world. A lot of photographers are really struggling with this. I was actually questioned. I was in Houston for an exhibition, and I was shooting power plants for my work for references. Very legally, far, over the border, and the FBI confiscated my camera and they questioned me in New York for 3 times. And actually had to call the gallery and say, does she show here, what's her work about, and I have a file now because of that.
Why? By the FBI?
By the FBI. They said, is this Danielle's Hager? This is the FBI.
Wow.
And I said,
wow.
They said, we have your photographs here, and we want to, they printed them off of my camera. They called the gallery. They called the collectors that got my work. I mean, this is like really intense. So, I mean, if we could just touch into like the implications in the art world, photographers have really been dealing with this for the past few years a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long-standing tradition in New York City. There's something. I'm being very general here, but something called street photography, which photographers, just things to see on, and that was kind of born in New York City, and it's almost like a traditional art form. Photographers running around, because New York, it's a theater. The whole thing is absurd. I mean, it's like, a friend of mine put it best. He said, every day in America on the news, there's something that defies credibility. And all you have to do is step out the door and you see weird stuff that makes interesting photographs and the architecture and just crazy people and whatever. But it is becoming a real problem in that here photographers are being harassed, arrested, not exactly in prison, but spending the night in jail and things like that for just doing their artwork. Now I'm Canadian, so in terms of the whole patriotism issue comes up, but I mean, these people are not unpatriotic. They're not trying to take photographs that are going to end up in the hands of terrorists or whatever else. It's not that kind of thing at all. But it's, for instance, to go back to the subway issue, the whole point was they didn't want, that was right after, do you recall there was a whole series of subway bombings in Spain and England, London, that sort of thing. The whole point was to countermand that kind of, those kind of terrorist attacks. But it's, how is that going to help? There are so many images of on the subway already. All they have to do is go online. They don't have to come, they're not going to come here and take pictures of the subway. All they got to do is go online. And the news, there's news footage. They can, if they want to take, they can. The company that makes the subway cars is Bombardier. They're actually a Canadian company out of Montreal. They can just call up the company. Hey, can we get the specs on the blah 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 train? We want to import them. I mean, there are so many ways around that. It's just becoming absurd. I mean, you get little kids being patted down as they're getting on the plane, and it's becoming a very serious civil liberties issue in addition to impeding artists. It's a big
the
problem.
photographers have really had quite a hard time. I know a lot of people, and I was actually told by the FBI agent, he said, "Darling, if you weren't a blonde woman," he said, "we would have just arrested you by now." He said, "We would have arrested you." And he said, "It's because of how you are and how you," he's like, "why you weren't?" And I was thinking, is it illegal to say this? Like, it just isn't, that doesn't, I mean,
that's interesting.
That's terrifying to me. But I was really compliant for hours. But and I've had a lot of art photographers friends who've had these experiences.
Yeah, I took one of my photo classes. We just went across on the Staten Island ferry. So the trip over and the trip back, just taking pictures. Each trip takes 20 minutes or something. And on the way back in, one of the students is standing in the front of the boat, front of the ferry, taking pictures of the Manhattan skyline as we get in. Beautiful vista. If you've never taken the trip, you should totally do it. It's kind of beautiful and it's free. And it doesn't take that long. You can literally go over and then get back on the same boat and come back. And she's taking pictures. Click, click, the city's getting closer, click, click, And then she gets to a certain point, one of the ferry guys, "Hey, you can't take pictures, get out of here." You can't take pictures, national security. She's like, what are you talking about? Whereas, I think, is it New York 1 or something? In their intro on TV, there's pictures, coming into the city on the Staten Island ferry. It's like, what the hell? So it's just getting ridiculous. And
well, before we finish up, maybe we should go into some of the. We got into an interesting conversation, but some of the tips you were talking about, go into some.
Yeah, we're gonna actually. David wanted me to touch on one thing in terms of edition sizes and things
really
like that.
Important.
With painters, you make a painting and there it is on the wall, kind of thing. With painting, drawing, that kind of stuff. Now, I actually started out as I went to, before I got into photography, I actually went to art school and did painting, drawing, lithography, etching, all that kind of stuff. And that was an issue in edition sizes. Typically we're making small print editions of 10 or something like that. With photography, it's a lot easier and cheaper to make larger editions. You can very easily spit out 2, 3, 4, 500 pictures. Not easily, but and they're all relatively the same. Especially with digital now, you can, I can take a disc or whatever to one of the photo labs, say I want 500 copies of this, and they spit it out. I